G'day everyone and welcome to another episode of Noelsy's Outdoors. On this episode we're going to be fitting a long range tank to my 90 series Prado, and after that we're going to go through a bit of a list of all the different challenges we had in fitting a DIY kit, to say. Hope you enjoy watching the video. It is a little bit hodgepodge together because of filming constraints, but you know, I think you get a rough idea as to what's involved in putting it in.
Alright, so I'm under the back of the vehicle just to give a recap of where I'm at with it. I've got, so far I took the hose clamp off of that bung there. I pulled the cap off and probably about 1/4 of a litre of petrol poured out of the thing. So yeah, that's cool. This here is the breather for the main fuel tank, which has been plumbed into what I assume to be a vapour pipe here. So that's a thing. Over here I've got the plug for it. This plug functions, seems to, but there is a little bit of physical damage, so that is a little bit of a pest. I think, as you can see, how the gap on one side there is a little bit narrower. I think this has been bashed or broken or something. So yeah, that little bit of gap there is a bit bigger, a bit less than that bit of gap there, so that's broken. That'll need to come off. This will need to come off because that cable tied in bit of hose there is not meant for that. Just to show you what I'm battling with here, I think that's the return line. This is the feed line, I'm positive. This is obviously currently spinning, but the problem is if I just get up in here, where is it? That flare nut on the other side, as you can see, I've attacked it with some crow's foot stuff and some open-ended spanners, and I've notched it once too many times trying to undo it, and it's just rounded a bit at the end there. So if I just twist that, you can sort of see, I don't know how well you can see it, but it's like been butchered at that end. But yeah, so I'm not super excited for that to have to come off, but I might have some tools to be able to fix this problem. But yeah, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare, I think, personally. Well, we'll keep at it and see how we go. Okay, sweet, so I'm underneath the car now. This is the guard for the sub tank just here, so that's what this is here. That's the back end of the vehicle. This up here, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but this here is the fuel solenoid changeover valve. I think what's happened is someone has bunged a bypass for this here with these. So that side goes on here, that side goes on there. Alright, so just under the car at the moment, as per. I've ended up bunging in from that hose, just with my fingers, just there. I ended up bunging on some new fuel injection hose into the bottom of the main tank fuel solenoid switch, and then I got the hose into that. What used to bypass it was this bit of hose just here, which was like conjoined at a plastic bit, and I figured if I pull that apart and then the plastic snaps inside the hose, I'll have to replace it anyway. So I just went and bought 1 meter of like this fuel injection hose. It's braided and stuff like that, so that should all be sweet. It should be the same sort of thing. It actually looks a bit beefier than the old hose did, so I think this will probably do it wonders. But yeah, in any case, that's the solenoid plumbing fixed again. Let's see if I can get another good look at that. Oh, yeah, so the solenoid plumbing from here into there, out of there, into there. That's all plumbed up correctly now, theoretically. Judging by the books that I've read and by the posts that I've seen and all that should all be sweet. But now I've got to go to the back of the car and I'm going to try and absolutely murder the rest of it and then go from there. So I'm just going to show you what's been the bane of my existence for the last couple of weeks. Get a load of this, right? So this is the old fuel feed line, right? So what I need to do is I need to grab that 14mm just there, and I need to grab this 19mm just here with something so that I can separate the two of them, because this is currently seized on. So yeah, I've been soaking it with WD-40. I've been doing all the usual stuff you'd expect. I've been bending the lines while I've been trying to do it. But yeah, I've now resorted to big 19mm tube socket. I'm going to get the 14mm spanner onto the back of that one there, and I'm going to tube socket with a breaker bar, and I'm going to see if I can't absolutely just reef it with the breaker bar. And I'm at that point now where I might just cut this off and then just like redo the fitting onto that instead, because that's just been annoying me to all ends, as words I'd use for it. But yeah, we'll see how we go with it, alright?
So we managed to get the flare nut off. We're just filing down the bad thread and we're going to reattach this one, so it all should be sweet. So just to give an update as to where we're at, we've removed the tow bar to be able to get easier access. We've got that flare nut done and off and cleaned up. The breather hose is still attached to the the breather for the fuel tank, so that's got to be removed. But yeah, no, we've gotten some decent access to this and got a couple of bolts floating out of it. But yeah.
So this here is the main tank that we're going to be putting into it. It's a 155 litre main tank from 4-wheel drive systems. I've just pulled the plastic like shrink wrap off of it, and I've got the plastic or the tape covers for the holes here where they've painted over. It's got internal baffles. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's a little bit of a plating just in there. What you have to do with these is you have to, before you put them in, is rinse them out with a bit of petrol first. That way it's got all the little bits of crud and stuff from in it is out and rinsed. And then yeah, we're going to be putting it in place of the main tank. There's a mounting bracket just there. I've got some nuts and bolts and some like rubber bungs for it. But yeah, we're going to have to adjust our breather valve to be able to fit this round piece. Because in a moment I'll show you what that looks like. It's actually got some tabs on it, whereas there's no tabs on this. So we're going to have to shred them tabs off so that it'll fit correctly. All in all though, it should be a relatively easy install. Okay, so this one here. You can see obviously with the tabs, it won't fit. Oh wow, doesn't feel like it's even going to fit at all actually. But yeah, you need to shave that tab off there and maybe even clean that hole off a little bit, but if I push it in, it should just fit in really, because it doesn't have to come back out again. And then we mount the breather hose on that, and then that will go to the front of the car. So yeah, just got to shave that tab there off and that tab there off so you can fit this breather into this thing. But yeah. So I've just spent 5 minutes filing that down, so now it's got no tab there and no tab there. Theoretically it should just pop in, and then when I really want it in there, I just push it in. Like you just push it in until it stops. Obviously before I do that though, I'm going to nail it the right orientation I need it in. But we have to rinse the tank out with petrol first before I do that. So, but yeah, I've prepped this now. This is ready to go in. Everything else should theoretically be ready to go in as well. I've just got to find the right nuts and bolts that thread into these holes here. I don't know if it's the factory ones still, because I've got them still, or if it's going to be like the new ones. But yeah, I've got all those there, so that's all sweet. Right, so we're just using the bit of fittings that came in the bag here, and we're going to be whacking this bung onto that. It's a 17mm by the look of it.
It's an 18mm.
It's an 18mm by the look of it. We've just drained out the, we've just done a flush of the internals, so we've got that cleaned out. The amount of stuff that came off it. I'm a little disappointed though, because you'd think for $1,000 for a bucket, for a bit of metal box, you'd have paint that was resistant to petrol. So as petrol was pouring out the bung, it was degrading the paint on the tank. So I don't know what that is, but oh well. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but you know, just a bit shit, that's all. 18mm? 18mm was perfect. Alright, let's get this back together and then we'll put the breathers and shit on it. So Anthony was just saying, before I cut him off, it's a tapered fitting, so don't over tighten it.
Did use thread tape, but we don't have thread tape.
Use thread tape, but we don't have any. Excellent. Alright, so currently while I'm just doing some other bits and pieces, I'm just going to be fixing up this wiring harness that's meant to plug into the car's wiring loom. So this end here plugs into the body of the car, where I've got that little bit of a plug at the underside of the car there. Goes all the way along. Normally this would plug into the sender at the top of the factory fuel tank, so that would plug into that port there. And then this here, with a spider there, then this here would normally, as you can see, would normally go to this style of plug here, which would then go to my fuel pump wiring just there. So that's where that goes. Now obviously, as you can tell, where I got this spare part from for this wiring harness was in a wreck, but for some strange reason they had plumbed the power for this into the cigarette socket here and cut a hole in the floor to run this cable. Why on earth, I have no idea, but that was probably why it was wrecked. But actually it was because it blew an engine, but you know, that's another point altogether. What I've done is I just used my multimeter on ohms resistance check, and I basically just plugged in my red prong to the plug piece here in the center for the red cable. So I just had a look at the back of the plug and I found that the red one there matches up to that red plug just there. Then I matched the red prong on there, and then I got the black prong and I plugged the black prong onto this red cable here. It's a bit chewed up, sure, but I found that there was zero resistance between there and between here, so good quality contact. If the meter had a red 1 like it does now, as they're not connected, it would have come up with just a 1 because it would have been broken. So when I touch these together, these numbers go down. That's to show that there's very, very little resistance, because obviously there's, it's touching together. I did the same thing again on the other side, on that prong there for the white-black cable, which I assume is a negative for the fuel pump wiring, onto that there. So yeah, same thing, perfect connection. Obviously these wires here are a bit butchered, but I'm going to use a crimping tool to strip that and then crimp this power cable back to it. It's only short because that plug and the fuel tank pump and the pump plug are only so far away. Like, I think even that far is about how far they are. So yeah, it'll end up being a little bit further than it needs to be, but that's okay. I probably could have got away with it being this long, but I've added a little bit just in case. So that'll fix up the factory wiring harness for the pump and the sender. I also plugged in this cable here, and then what I did was I plugged in this plug into the sender here, and while the car was switched to the on position with the battery in, I literally just had it sitting like this, obviously. So while it's sitting like this, obviously this is basically the empty orientation. If I held it up like that, theoretically it would show full on the dial. And sure enough, when I lifted up this kick leg here, the fuel tank went to full. The fuel gauge on the factory dash went to full. Now the only thing about the dash that I've got left over to worry about there for that regard is there's no empty fuel light on the dash. So I think either someone's removed it or it's blown, because I'm pretty confident there's meant to be one. But I'll find out later on in the future when I pull it apart to do my other bit of work on the dash that I wanted to do anyway. So yeah, stay tuned for that. So far though, I'm just going to crimp this stuff together here and then make that attached. I'm going to obviously match red to red, because that's where red goes, and then the white red that's normally on the factory wiring harness is the same color as the one that's under here anyway. So yeah, I'm just going to connect the black to the white and then the red to the red, and then that'll fix up my wiring harness for the fuel, for the main tank. So we've managed to fit up the bits and pieces onto the actual tank. So we've got the breather bit that goes into that. We've got a bit of hose onto that for that there. We've got the sender piece here plugged in and harnessed up with the fuel pump and pickup. Plugged into that harness there. That all goes to that harness there. We've got the neck filler here and the breather here. They're plumbed up. They're all good. So they're all going to end up plumbed in. Down up into here. We've mounted up the bracing for the front of the actual tank, but that fuel pump will plumb into that cable, into that tube there. I'm pretty confident from memory that is the breather one, and then that is the filler one. So that'll go for the breather, that'll go for the filler, and then that'll be all of that plugged in. We'll need to plug in the harness to that plug there, and then our filler tube and breather tube will need to go into that there. Once all of that is plugged in, that should mean that it works. Now this won't be something we'll be able to film, but it's a big job that requires 2 sets of hands, so we'll...
Mostly space that's the issue.
Yeah, it's mostly space that's the issue. We're going to end up having that all set up and all that. I've already plumbed up the factory solenoid switchover, and I've removed the bung from the main filler. So once it's mounted, we should be right as rain.
Alright, so I'm back under the car now, and basically we've got the tank in. It's all bolted up with its 2 bolts, one just there and one just over there. Obviously the tow bar is still off, I'll have to reattach that later, but I've gotten this filler tube in there, I've gotten the breather tube in there. If I just come under the car here a bit further, I've got the 3 bolts at the front there that mounted up, so they're with rubbers and things like that instead there. So you might be able to just see one of these tubes here. I think that one's for the fill tube. I think so. Yes, it is. That's for the filler. Up here I've got a breather hose up in there, so that's your filler, just like that there. Got your breather hose up here. A lot of this stuff is all covered up because you can't see it through, like, you know, chassis rails and stuff like that. over here, I've got it. It's got some clearance on the actual exhaust. I don't know how well you can see that because it's really dark under there, but there is about 7 mils of clearance between the body of the fuel tank and the exhaust. So that's good. I don't think that's going to get any problems anytime soon. But currently, the problem that I have at the moment is, now there's obviously an electrical plug that goes to the pump and the sender. But the issue is this plug is, for one, it's mounted between these 2 tubes, which is, you know, not good. I need to move that if I can. I might have to disconnect that tube there and pull it off and then do it on, but these are a huge pain, and I'll get to that in a moment. But what needs to happen is that plug you can see just up on there needs to be connected to this plug here. Now, it was connected and actually zip tied because the plug is broken, but the issue is as we've put the tank on and we've put the tubes on, we've got this cable stuck between here, the plug must have come undone or something. So when I've gone to fire it up and test it out, the plug must have disconnected because I don't get any reading on the fuel gauge like I tested, and I don't get any power to the fuel pump at all. So I don't know what the go with that is, but yeah, it's one of them sort of things. Yeah, so what I'm gonna have to do now is I'm gonna have to see if I can undo this to get it out of there. That might take me some serious manpower, and then I've got to get it plugged into. That plug up there. I'll have to test the plug again as well with my multimeter to make sure that when the car is meant to be running, it's got 12 volt power to the pump. If there isn't 12 volt power to the pump when I try to do that, that could mean some major fault somewhere else. Like I might need to replace a relay or something, but yeah, for now I'm going to get this breather hose off because that's going to be the easiest, and then get this cable out of here. Now when we were fitting this tub, I couldn't actually, this tank, sorry, when we were fitting this tank, I actually physically couldn't do it on my own because it's just so massive and so bulky, and I'm on the back of the car and all that sort of stuff. It is a 2-man job. So I enlisted the help of my brother, who you may have heard of earlier in the video. Yeah, these hoses are an absolute mongrel to get on. They're just, you know, it's like the tubing can't be long enough, or this tubing here is too thick to be able to flex it easily enough to get it on there. You obviously can't use softer silicone hose because the fuel would just destroy it. So yeah, it's got hose, it's compatible with petrol to be able to like whack it on there. Problem is, it was just an absolute pain. So we've got it on there though, and I don't know if you can see up between that gap, we've managed to get a hose clamp onto it, but it's not on there very, very well. In fact, you can't even see where it's on there, but just beyond this chassis rail here, it's on there with a hose clamp with just enough to sort of not spill. Now I've tested this with spillage because I've put about 40 litres into this 150 litre tank, and that's what sort of alerted me to the electrical problem, because it didn't register a quarter of a tank. It didn't actually register any fuel at all. So I was expecting it to be wrong, like I'm not expecting it to be exactly correct, but any fuel, nothing, didn't read anything, nothing at all. So what that means is once I get these plugs connected and I'll test out the 12 volt plugging for that, I'll, if there's no 12 volt to the pump, I'll have to just go backwards up the line to see if there's damage or a failed relay or something. But hopefully if I can get this plug plugged in correctly and properly, maybe it'll just work. And if it does, that will be heaven on earth is what it'll be. So we're gonna go through that, and I'll catch you up, see how I went with it. Okay, so here I am in the car now. I've managed to I plugged in that plug at the back. I undid a rubber grommet to give me some extra room, but I'm actually starting to get a fuel reading. So I'm gonna wait until this fuel reading stops moving, and I'm gonna pray that once it's up to the point that I think it should be up to, it should get up to the quarter line mark once it's stopped moving. So I'll give you an update on that in a minute when I do, but I'm still concerned about the voltage of the fuel pump being nothing. And if that's a problem, then I'm going to have to do something about that. But the fuel gauge works, so it's getting power there. But is the fuel pump going to work? And that's my question. So I'll just leave it on for a hot minute, and we'll see what goes on with that. And then we'll attempt to crank it over, see if it starts. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, I don't know yet, but then we'll go from there. Alright, so I'm going to go for the moment of truth now. I'm just going to switch the car to the on position. Got it on. Turn off my head unit when it decides to go up, just so that the phone doesn't automatically connect to the Bluetooth. Turn that off, there we go.
Now, I've got it switched to sub at the current, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it in sub, and I'm going to switch it over and see what happens, to see if it likes to fire up. Alright. There we go. So it's fired up on sub. No. Hey, is that on main? Oh my god, that's running. Oh my god, it's running on main. Because the light's off. Oh my god, what if I... And it switched over to sub. Oh my god, it works. Holy shit. Now I just have to zip tie that plug so it doesn't come undone, and then we're off for the races. Oh, I can't even explain how absolutely ecstatic I am that this runs right now. And sure, the fuel gauge needs adjusting, but I've got a sub tank that's perfect, so I can just run it until it dies. What concerns me though is there's no low fuel light for when it's like empty. But theoretically, that's just a dash apart and then see if it's got a blown bulb. Oh my god, that's on sub. Let's switch it back over. That's been switched back over. It hasn't died. Oh my god, it runs. It currently runs. I can't tell you all how happy I am of that. That is excellent. I've been battling with this car electrically, or like, you know, off and on with these mechanical problems for the last probably 4 weekends. Like, it's just been the stuff. And the car is currently running on a main tank. There is the capacity of 200 litres. Now, it's been running for a bit on this thing here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under it again and check for any leaks to see if I've not plumbed it up. I don't think I've plumbed it up wrong because it's running. I'm going to go check to see if there's not any weird pressure, like maybe I've got the wrong, like a breather is where a return should be. I'm going to go check for that. That should be a thing. Hopefully there is not, but all will tell in a hot bit, so I'm going to go look to see if there's not pressure or anything. All right, better switch the car off now.
So after all of that, we did actually have a couple of challenges I wanted to go through to be able to get all this sort of project finished. Obviously, now that we've got the tank in the car, the fuel pump works, the sender works, it needs adjusting and stuff like that. But these are the couple of things that we had some real sort of issues with, like some major issues. First one obviously was finding the parts. The parts, now when you buy a long range fuel tank that requires the factory sender and the factory fuel pickup, and you don't have those because it's an old LPG car, the hardest part is finding those parts when they've been discontinued. Now, I searched for maybe 7 weeks. 7 weeks I think I put into the searching for it. I couldn't get a fuel pickup, I couldn't get a breather, I couldn't get a sender. I ended up buying a sender from a wreckers in the Illawarra in Dapto. And when I first saw it, after visual inspections of different videos and stuff about doing the job, I thought that maybe this sender wasn't actually going to work because it looked like it had missing components. But turned out that sender actually did function as it was meant to, like it had resistances showing when you move the arm, so I guess that's sort of how that goes. The breather, I never even thought about having to try and find because I thought the breather was just built into the fuel pickup, but that's not the case either. So there's 3 pieces that go to the top of the fuel tank in the car. All the extra appropriate hoses that I never thought I would need to have searched for either, they were all obviously just MIA, they were missing. In fact, one of them, obviously, as you've seen in the video, was actually cut off. One we had to go with a flare nut spanner and a 19 mil. I think it was a 14 mil flare nut spanner and a 19 mil. Either way, it was a nightmare to get off. The other problems we had also were I don't want to say manufacturing issues with the tank, but that's sort of what I can imagine it to be. The bracket that holds the front of the tank to the body of the car needed to be bent and adjusted to actually get it to fit, so that was, doable. We ended up bolting it to the bolts that needed to be and then ratcheting it until it was bent in the correct place. There was some missing bolt holes on the top of the fuel tank for the fuel pickup. There's 2 actually, so of the 7 holes on the fuel pickup, only 5 bolts are holding it together. Now it seals fine, but it's just disappointing. The wiring harness, the factory wiring harness that I had to put together, obviously didn't need to be extended from the length of the sender to the actual main plug, but it really should have been. It really should have been extended maybe about another 2 centimeters. If it had been 2 centimeters long, the wiring harness would not have any trouble plugging into the body harness at all. The other problems we had obviously were little bits and pieces of, like, you know, fiddly jobs, like having to put the filler tube back onto the tank and onto the body. The tube that I had from the tank that I had bought was just perished and solid, so it had no flex left in it, so you literally couldn't do it without some sort of major hassle. So we went out and bought another fuel compatible bit of hose to whack onto the actual body, which had enough flex for us to be able to get on there, but it still needs adjustment. It's still not perfect the way I'd like it to be. But realistically, the big part of this job that's taken me so long is the manual handling. It's a 40 kilogram tank, and I don't have a gearbox jack and I don't have a hoist. I'm doing this on a driveway, and it really did take 2 people to be able to do that, and we only just managed to do it with 2 people. It's definitely a multi-person job if you're planning to do this on the driveway. If I was to do it again, I would probably legitimately pay someone to do it, but that's what we're about here, you know, like we're about doing it yourself and getting it all sorted and stuff like that. So yeah, all in all though, I think after the problems and after everything, realistically, I'm just so glad that I finally have 2 fuel tanks again. It's been a long time coming. When we first bought the car, we had the plans to be able to do this at some point in the future, and I guess that point is now. So we're at that point now where the car is almost complete, realistically. The only thing that needs to be changed now is it needs a snorkel, and it probably could use a rear bar, but even with the fuel capacity from the extra fuel, the main fuel tank now, rear bar is almost not an essential. The only reason you'd go for a rear bar is if, like, you're going to be doing some sort of major tracks that require good departure angle or solid departure protection. So yeah, the car's just about finished. It's only a few steps away from actually having be a complete proper touring weapon. Yeah, I want you to let me know in the comments exactly what you think of it, what you think the next project should be. I've got a few things lined up in the near future for it and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I want you to let me know in the comments how you feel about it.
Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Noelsy's Outdoors. I know this one was a bit longer, but I wanted to get as much detail in about this as I can. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.